On the night of December 23rd, slipping into the early hours of Christmas morning in 2004, a brutal snowstorm swallowed the rural backroads of Aroostook County, Maine. Snow blurred the line between road, forest, and stream as Warren Hale, a veteran snowplow driver, took his shift like he always did, quietly, dutifully, trusting an old machine and his instincts more than luck. At exactly 3:17 a.m., his headlights caught a figure standing in the middle of the road, too tall for a man, too still for an animal. Its massive, dark, snow-matted form watching him with amber eyes that reflected awareness, not fear. It stepped aside without aggression, reappeared later pacing his truck with impossible precision. And that same night, when Warren stopped to help a stranded woman freezing in a ditch, the creature returned once more, watching, judging, yet choosing not to cross a line. Over the years, Warren came to understand that what he encountered was not a monster, but a guardian of sorts. A presence that lives at the edge of light, appearing in storms, responding not to fear, but to compassion. And now, as you listen to this story, I want to ask you, dear listener, where are you watching or listening from right now? What should we call you? What name would you like this community to know you by? And how far do you think this story can travel? From one snowy road in Maine to hearts across the world? Wherever you are, please accept my warmest greetings and thanks for being here. If you feel that quiet pull toward the mysteries of the forest and the legends of Bigfoot, gently tap like, subscribe to the channel, and join us as we build a thoughtful, respectful community that believes these stories are not just about what we see in the dark, but about who we choose to be when we're there together. It was December 23rd, 2004. Northern Maine was buried under a siege of snow so relentless it blurred the line between day and night. Locals in Aroostook County had stopped using the calendar. They measured time by the storm, before the drift swallowed the porch, after the whiteout claimed Route 11. During the third night when the wind howled like something old and restless was hunting in the trees, Warren Hale sat in the cab of Unit 7, the county's oldest but most reliable snowplow. Its yellow paint faded to a shade somewhere between bruised mustard and resignation. He'd asked for this route himself, Aroostook Bend, knowing full well what it meant. Narrow rural roads, no streetlights, no nearby help, just black spruce and snowbanks as tall as a man. But Warren preferred these backwoods stretches over the main highways. The main road has rules and street lamps, he'd once told a younger plowhand. The country road only has consequences. The dashboard clock glowed 3:14 a.m. Warren's thermos had long since gone cold, and the hum of the engine was the only thing keeping him tethered to the moment. Outside, the blizzard was a living thing. Wind screamed against the windshield. Snow slapped sideways across the glass, visibility fluctuating between a quarter mile and a breath. He steered into the next curve, the one that followed the bend of a half-frozen creek. Locals called it Aroostook Bend. Some avoided it after midnight. He didn't. The wipers worked hard against the accumulating snow. The world outside was a smear of white and shadow. Warren leaned forward instinctively, squinting out into the pale chaos, right as his headlights pierced a shape dead center of the road. He instinctively tapped the brakes. The plow groaned and slowed. A shape stood maybe 10 yards ahead, motionless, centered between the banks of snow he'd carved just an hour earlier. It didn't flinch in the lights, didn't move at all. He thought maybe it was a moose at first, or a bear. Common enough, even in storms like this. But moose had the gait of things that didn't care to explain themselves. Bears hunkered down in this kind of weather. This thing just stood there, upright, waiting. He braked fully and stopped. Through the thick windshield, Warren stared. The figure wasn't stooped. It wasn't walking on 4 legs. It stood as tall as the cab, maybe taller. Its silhouette was vaguely human, but off. The shoulders were too broad, the arms too long. Fur, dark, tangled, snow-covered, matted against the frame. The face wasn't clear, but two glowing points reflected the light. Not yellow like deer eyes, not green like a dog's. Amber red, like heated copper catching flame. It didn't blink, it didn't snarl. It just looked at him. Warren's heartbeat climbed. Not panicked, but alert. The way a man feels when he realizes he's not in control of the situation anymore. His hand found the switch for the air horn. One long blast shattered the night. The creature flinched, barely. A tilt of the head, a shift of weight. It wasn't fear, more like irritation. A response you'd get from someone being disturbed during sacred silence. It took a single step toward the edge of the road. Climbed the snowbank in 2 strides, movements fluid but deliberate, and disappeared into the wall of trees beyond, swallowed by snow and shadow. Warren stared at the empty road. And then it happened. The old AM radio in the dashboard went dead. Static ceased. Not even a hum, as if something had sucked all the sound out of the world. The dashboard clock flicked to 3:18, and just like that, the radio snapped back on, mid-commercial for a local tractor dealer. Warren didn't move. Hands still gripped the wheel. He wasn't sure how long he sat there. He didn't feel scared exactly. There was no sense of danger. Not like when a bear gets too close, or when black ice grabs the back tires. He felt seen. More than that, he felt like the creature hadn't feared him, hadn't respected him. It had simply measured him, as if deciding what kind of thing he was. Warren pressed the pedal again. The truck groaned forward, blades scraping a line through the road that would be buried again in 30 minutes. He kept driving, hands steady, eyes flicking now and then toward the trees. But something in him had shifted. He didn't know what yet, only that something had marked this night. And maybe, just maybe, someone else had been plowing a parallel road just out of sight. He didn't tell dispatch. What could he say? I saw something? That wouldn't go over well. Folks in town had stories, sure, but stories didn't mix well with county records. Instead, he checked in like usual, gave weather updates, logged his route, and mentioned nothing about what had stood in the middle of Aroostook Bend. Snow piled higher, wind blew harder. Warren reached for his thermos, found it empty, and set it back down. The heater kept the cold out, but not the quiet. And somewhere in that quiet, a different kind of noise settled. Not sound exactly, more like a pressure in the chest, like the hush before a revelation or the breath right before something sacred speaks. Still he drove. Each pass of the plow felt heavier, as if the snow wasn't just snow anymore, as if it was memory or warning or both. The radio played old country songs between forecasts. A man sang about losing his wife to the rain and his dog to the bottle. Warren listened without hearing. The storm outside wasn't letting up. Visibility was worse now. He could barely see beyond the blade. But the road was his. It had been for years. At 3:51, the plow looped back around toward the bend. He checked his mirrors. No traffic, no lights. Just white, endless white. And yet, somewhere in his gut, he felt it. That tickle in the ribs that said he wasn't alone. He turned his eyes to the snowbank ahead, to the same patch of road where the figure had stood. Nothing. But the air felt different there, like the trees were watching, like something ancient had woken just a little. He didn't press the horn this time, didn't speak. He simply drove, slower now, as if the road itself required reverence. And far off, deep in the woods where headlights couldn't reach, something moved in time with him, step for step, but not to chase, not to stalk, to accompany. Warren didn't know it yet, but this storm had chosen him, and the rules of the road, at least on Aroostook Bend, were no longer his to make. He kept going, blade down, eyes forward. Behind him, snow filled the space where his tracks had been, as if the night wanted to erase his passage, or preserve it. Either way, he wasn't the only one out there. And from this point on, he never would be again. Warren didn't say a word about what he saw. Not to dispatch. Not to the guy fueling trucks at the depot. not even to himself. He just kept driving, mile after mile of silence, broken only by the groan of the blade and the low whine of the engine against the wind. The storm hadn't let up. If anything, it had gotten meaner. Snow came sideways now, ripping through the trees in sheets. The world had no shape to it, just white wind and the narrow tunnel his headlights managed to cut. He told himself it could have been exhaustion. He'd been behind the wheel since dusk. That kind of monotony, the hiss of tires on fresh snow, the same row of pines blinking past the windshield, it could wear on a man's mind. But something about those eyes, the way they didn't blink, the way they didn't need to. He tried brushing it off. Just a trick of the light. Could have been a tall man in furs. Could have been a moose standing oddly. But nothing he came up with sat right in his gut. There was too much knowing in that stare, too much stillness in its body. By 4:03 a.m., the route had looped him back around to the stretch called Aroostook Bend. The snow was deeper now, the banks taller. It was harder to tell where the road ended and the woods began. He leaned forward in his seat, squinting out through the flurries. His wipers worked overtime, slapping rhythmically across the glass. The heater hummed low. His breath fogged faintly on the window. And then he saw it again. Same place, same shape. Only this time it wasn't standing still. It was walking. Right alongside the snowbank he'd cleared an hour earlier, keeping pace. Warren's hands tightened on the wheel. He didn't hit the brakes, didn't speed up, just watched. The creature didn't look at him. It just walked, like it had every right to be there. Like this was its road too. Maybe it was. He nudged the gas. The truck picked up speed. So did the figure. Still no glance toward the cab. Just a steady stride, powerful, quiet, matching him, move for move. It stayed about 20 feet away, just outside the arc of the headlights, but close enough to see the outline. Shoulders like a linebacker, arms swinging long and low. Snow clung to its fur but didn't weigh it down. It moved like something built for this kind of cold. Built for silence. He slowed. So did it. He sped up again, just a little. So did it. It wasn't a game. It was a rhythm. Like two horses trotting side by side on a snowy trail. Like a beat being kept. Warren flicked his eyes to the rear-view mirror. The taillights glowed faintly, casting red over the churned road behind him. But just beyond the light, he saw the tracks. Big ones. Longer than a boot, wider than a man's shoulder. But what struck him hardest, what sent that prickle down his spine, was how shallow they were. The snow was thick, fresh. His own boots would have sunk 6 inches deep in it. But these prints, they barely dented the surface, like it wasn't even heavy. Or like the ground didn't want to hold its weight. Warren's throat dried. He reached for the horn again, hesitated, then tapped it once. A short burst. The figure stopped, turned its head, and looked straight into the cab. Warren's breath caught. Those amber eyes again. Burning low, like coals hidden in wet wood. Not angry, not wild, just aware, intelligent, assessing. There was something behind that gaze. Not curiosity exactly. Not threat. It was deeper than that. Like being watched by something ancient. Something that had seen too many winters to be impressed by headlights or diesel engines. Something that had rules of its own. The plow slowed almost to a stop. The creature held his gaze for a beat longer, then turned without hurry, stepped into the tree line, and disappeared without a sound. Warren sat in the idling cab, listening to the thrum of the engine and the soft tick of snow hitting metal. His fingers hovered near the radio. But he didn't call it in, didn't log anything. He knew better. This wasn't the kind of thing you tried to explain. He shifted into drive and moved forward again, slower this time. Deliberate. The snowbank to his right looked untouched, like nothing had ever walked there. But he knew what he'd seen. And more importantly, he understood something he hadn't before. He wasn't being hunted. He was being watched, measured, maybe even judged. Not like prey, more like a neighbor. An intruder maybe, but not a threat. Not yet. The wind howled again, catching the edge of the truck and making it sway just slightly. The heater blew warm against his boots. Somewhere behind him, the storm erased his tracks. Somewhere ahead, the road wound deeper into the woods. The radio crackled to life. A voice, female, crackly from distance. "Unit 7, this is dispatch. We got a car stuck in the ditch near the county line turnoff. Passenger vehicle, female driver. Looks like she slid off around 3:45. You're the closest. Can you divert and assist?" Warren reached for the mic, thumbed the button. "Copy that, I'm en route." He let go, let the silence settle again. But it wasn't silence now. It was presence. Like the woods had leaned in, like something had noted the call, noted his answer, and was approving, or maybe just listening. He turned off the main loop and headed toward the old county road that twisted along the backside of the forest. The trees leaned closer here. The snow came thicker. He kept the blade up now, didn't want to throw anything the wrong way, didn't want to disturb more than he had to. He passed the curve where the power lines dipped low, saw the glint of headlights in the ditch up ahead. A compact sedan, nose first into the embankment, hazard lights blinking slow and steady like a heartbeat. But even before he reached her, he felt it again, the sense of not being alone. Not just the woman in the car, something else, somewhere just beyond the edge of light, something that had been walking beside him, and maybe, for reasons Warren didn't yet understand, had chosen not to leave. Warren turned the wheel slowly, easing Unit 7 off the main stretch and onto the narrower county spur. The tires crunched over packed snow. The blade lifted just enough to avoid catching the uneven shoulder. The storm pressed in tighter here. Trees crowded close, their branches heavy and bowed, forming a tunnel of black and white that swallowed the road ahead. The hazard lights from the stranded car flickered faintly through the snowfall, an unsteady pulse that looked almost fragile against the size of the night. He felt the familiar pull in his chest then. Not fear, responsibility. The kind that came from decades of stopping when others didn't, of turning back when it would have been easier to keep going. He told himself that was all this was. Just another call, another winter night, another driver who'd underestimated black ice and paid for it. Still, he couldn't shake the awareness riding with him. The sense that the woods had shifted when he left Aroostook Bend, that whatever had walked beside him earlier hadn't gone far. He slowed as he approached the ditch. A compact sedan sat nose down, its front end buried in snow and frozen mud. The back wheels spun uselessly, throwing up powder that went nowhere. A young woman sat behind the wheel, shoulders hunched, hands tight around it, as if the car itself were the only solid thing left in the world. Warren parked at an angle, set the brake, and stepped down from the cab. The cold hit him hard and fast, biting through his coat and into his bones. The wind stole his breath for a second. Snow stung his cheeks. He pulled his hat lower and started toward the car, boots sinking deep with every step. He raised a hand so she could see him through the windshield. "You okay in there?" he called out, his voice roughened by wind. The driver startled, then nodded quickly. She rolled the window down just enough to speak. "I think so," she said. Her voice shook. From cold. From more than cold. I couldn't see the curve. The back just slid." "That happens," Warren said gently. "You hurt?" She shook her head again. "Just scared." He gave her a small nod. "All right, we'll get you out." He walked back to the truck for the tow chain. As he pulled it free, he felt it again. That pressure, like eyes on his back. He straightened slowly, scanning the tree line beyond the car. Snow fell thick and fast, but something darker crouched low in the brush near the edge of the clearing. At first, his mind tried to simplify it. Bear. A deer hunched against the storm. But the shape was wrong. Too still, too deliberate. It shifted. Not forward, not back. Closer. Warren's breath caught. His hand tightened on the chain. The woman in the car hadn't seen it yet. She was looking down, fumbling with something in her lap. He took a step toward her, putting himself between the car and the brush without fully realizing he'd done it. "Ma'am," he said, keeping his voice calm. "Stay in the car." She looked up at him, confused. "What?" He didn't answer right away. The shape in the brush rose slightly, unfolding from its crouch. Snow slid from its shoulders. It wasn't hiding. It wasn't stalking. It was simply approaching, with the same steady confidence he'd seen before, the same measured pace, like it knew there was nowhere else it needed to be. Warren moved faster now. He dropped the chain and reached for the horn on the truck. The blast tore through the storm. Once, twice, long and loud. The creature stopped. Then it stood, fully upright. The woman screamed. Warren's heart slammed against his ribs. The thing in front of them was taller than any man he'd ever seen. Taller than the cab of Unit 7. Broad as the door of a barn. Fur dark and thick, matted with ice and snow. Its face caught the edge of the headlights now, and Warren saw it clearly for the first time. Not animal, not human. Something in between. A face with structure. Eyes set deep. Brow heavy. Expression unmistakable. Anger. Not blind rage, not feral. Controlled, directed, but it didn't lunge, didn't charge. It held its ground, chest rising and falling slowly, eyes flicking once, just once, from Warren to the woman in the car. Then, just as deliberately, it took a step back, another and another, until the trees swallowed it whole. Silence crashed in behind it. The woman sobbed openly now, hands shaking so badly she could barely keep them on the wheel. Warren forced himself to breathe. He moved to her door, crouched so she could see his face. "It's gone," he said softly. "You're okay." She shook her head, tears streaking down her cheeks. "What was that? What was that?" Warren swallowed. He could feel his pulse in his ears. "We'll talk about it later," he said. "Right now, let's get you out of here." She nodded, clinging to his voice like a rope. As he worked the chain into place, Warren noticed something else. The woman had an envelope clutched tight against her chest, knuckles white. Old paper, creased, like it had been opened and folded more times than it could count. He hadn't seen it before, but the creature had. That was what it had been looking at. Not the truck, not him. That envelope. He finished hooking the chain and climbed back into the cab. The engine roared to life, familiar and grounding. He eased the plow forward, careful not to jerk the line. The sedan groaned, resisted, then slowly, blessedly, slid free of the ditch. Tires found traction. The car rocked once and settled on the road. Warren cut the engine and climbed back down. The woman opened her door and stumbled out, legs weak. He caught her before she could fall. "Easy," he said. "I've got you." She clutched his coat, sobbing into his chest now. Not from terror anymore, from release. I thought nobody was coming," she choked out. "I thought I'd be out here all night." Warren felt something tighten behind his eyes. He'd heard that before. Different storms, different roads, same words. "You weren't alone," he said quietly. "Not tonight." She pulled back, wiping her face. "Thank you," she whispered. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't stopped." He glanced once toward the trees. Snow fell undisturbed. No movement, no sound. Just dark forest and wind. Neither did he. They exchanged names briefly. Tessa. She was trying to get home for Christmas Eve. Her phone battery blinked red, nearly dead. Warren gave her directions back to the main road. Watched until her taillights disappeared into the storm. Only then did he let himself stand still. The cold crept back in. The wind howled. And somewhere deep in the woods, something shifted its weight. Warren knew it hadn't been an accident. The creature hadn't come to harm her. It had come to see, to check, to make sure. He climbed back into Unit 7, hands steady now, heart heavy but clear. As he pulled away, he looked one last time at the edge of the clearing. He couldn't see it, but he could feel it, watching. And for the first time that night, Warren understood something he hadn't wanted to admit before. Whatever lived in these woods, it cared who stopped and who didn't. He drove back into the storm, the blade cutting a clean line through the snow, unaware that the road ahead was already changing, not just for him, but for everyone who would pass through Aroostook Bend after. The night closed in behind him, leaving only the whisper of wind and the faint impression of something tall and patient standing just beyond the reach of light. Warren didn't file a detailed report. He checked the right boxes, marked it animal obstruction and ditch assist. Didn't use the words he wanted to. Didn't describe the amber glow in those eyes, or the way the snow hadn't swallowed its steps like it should have. Didn't mention that the radio had gone quiet for exactly 60 seconds, or how the young woman, Tessa, that was her name, had looked more haunted by the silence after than by the creature itself. There were things you didn't put in county logs, things that didn't belong in systems built for traffic and salt budgets. Back at the depot, no one asked much. No one ever did. It was Christmas Eve morning. People wanted to go home. Warren rinsed off the Plow's undercarriage, checked the blade for damage, and locked up the shed like it was any other night. But something followed him home. Not a shadow, not a fear, just the kind of weight that settles in your chest when the world turns a little sideways, and you're the only one who noticed. In the quiet of his kitchen, Warren stood with the coffee pot in one hand and stared out the window. The backyard looked like a postcard. Fresh snow. Pine branches dipped low like they were bowing to something unseen. He didn't feel crazy. He felt aware. That was worse, in a way. He slept in his chair that morning, not because he was old, but because sleep came only in pieces now. His dreams were half silent, filled with wind, filled with something walking beside him, never quite turning to look. Weeks passed. The snow kept coming. January blurred into February, then dipped toward the early stirrings of spring. Ice clung stubborn in the shadows. Roads turned to slush, and the backcountry routes thinned to hard gray ruts. Warren kept plowing, kept his head down. But the feeling never left. One overcast afternoon, parked outside the town co-op, Warren found Deputy Marcy Klein leaning against her cruiser with a clipboard in hand. She was bundled in her winter gear, red scarf tucked into her collar, notebook tucked under one arm like she wasn't sure if she was on duty or just carrying the habit with her. "Hey, Warren," she said as he passed. "Got a second?" He nodded slowly, wary but polite. "Sure. Everything all right?" Marcy tilted her head. "You worked Christmas Eve, right? That snowstorm?" "You know I did." She opened her notebook. "We've been reviewing old call records, weather-related stuff, just housekeeping. I noticed something strange. You logged an animal obstruction near Aroostook Bend at 3:18 a.m. "That's right." She paused. That time caught my attention. Warren said nothing. Marcy flipped through a few pages, pulled a dog-eared photocopy from a sleeve. "Back in 1993, there was a report from a local, trucker I think, same area, same time, said he saw a shadow cross the road. Not an animal, not a person, just a shape. His words were, 'It crossed like it belonged.'" He wrote down the time, 3:17 a.m. Warren felt a cold trickle behind his ribs. 3:17, she repeated. "Strange coincidence, right?" "Maybe." He looked past her, toward the trees on the far ridge. The snow had melted low there, exposing rock and root like ribs beneath thin skin. "Warren," she said gently, "you saw something, didn't you?" He met her eyes. "I saw snow. I saw a woman in a ditch. I saw what looked like a large animal. Maybe upright. Maybe not. It walked away. That's all I can confirm." Marcy gave a slow nod. "I get it." She pulled another sheet from her folder. It was a photograph. Old Polaroid, the edges curled, corners darkened by age and heat. She handed it to him without a word. Warren held it steady. The photo showed a tree line, taken during daylight after a heavy storm. A snowbank sloped in from the left. And near the edge of the woods, blurred but undeniable, a shape. Upright, broad, mid-step, "You think it's real?" he asked. "I think it's too old to fake and too weird to ignore." "Where'd it come from?" "Pastor Bennett. Found it in a donation box years ago. No note, just this and a single line on the back. Don't honk at the bend 3 times. Warren felt his stomach shift, because that night, without thinking, he'd hit the horn 3 times. Once to scare it, twice more when it moved toward the woman's car. 3. Marcy watched him. "You okay?" He nodded, handed the photo back. "You didn't honk 3 times, did you?" He lied. "Just once." She didn't push it. Warren got in his truck, drove away slower than usual. The road curved south through town, past the chapel, past the cemetery still half frozen, past the old bait shop now boarded for good. The sky hung low, heavy with thaw, and somewhere deep in the timberline something shifted in the underbrush. That night, Warren sat in the garage, oil-stained boots on the concrete, flipping through his old service logbooks. He found the entry from 1988 without needing to look hard. December 22nd. A call had come in around 2:40 a.m. Vehicle disabled, possibly abandoned. East shoulder of County 9. He remembered the weather that night. Worse than usual. Black ice every 2 miles. He'd passed the car, headlights off, no hazard lights blinking. He'd slowed, thought about stopping, but something in him had said keep going. He had another 5 miles to clear. The car wasn't smoking. No movement inside, no reason to assume it was urgent. The next day, he heard a boy had been found inside, passed out from hypothermia. Survived, but barely. Warren had never forgiven himself. He'd stopped ever since. Stopped even when it was dangerous, even when it cost him time or gear. Because some part of him still lived on that stretch of road, staring at a lifeless sedan with the defroster barely working and frostbite crawling up a kid's toes. And on Christmas Eve, when he saw Tessa in that ditch, he didn't hesitate. He'd turned back. Maybe that was why the creature didn't cross again. Or maybe that was why it came. He didn't pretend to know. But he was starting to believe that whatever lived in Aroostook Bend didn't move without reason. That maybe it wasn't just some animal pushed close to the road by hunger or cold. Maybe it was the opposite. Maybe it stood close to the road because it needed to see. To decide, he thought about what it had looked at. Not him. The envelope in Tessa's lap. She never mentioned what was inside. He didn't ask. But the way she held it, tight to her chest, as if it were the last anchor she had to someone she'd already lost. It mattered. He saw it. The creature saw it. Maybe some things didn't need language. Maybe they just needed silence long enough to be understood. Warren turned off the garage light, stepped into the night. The wind was calmer now. The snow had crusted over, hard beneath his boots. He looked up toward the bend, though the trees blocked most of it. Somewhere in those woods, something had watched him for years. He was certain of it now. But what unsettled him wasn't that it had watched. It was that he had finally started watching back. And for the first time, he didn't feel like the plow was the only thing keeping the road safe. Something else was out there, and it had its own reasons. He just hadn't earned the explanation yet. Not fully. Not yet. But he was getting closer. The storm hadn't relented that winter. It only changed its face. Some nights, it would roar across the timber with fists of wind and hard-packed snow that rattled the plow's frame like bones in a drum. Other nights, it would sit like a quiet thing, watching, pressing down with that heavy, suffocating silence that made the air feel dense, like breathing underwater. Those were the nights that tested Warren Hale the most, because those were the nights he wasn't sure what was watching back. By January's end, the roads had become a second home. Unit 7 rumbled through the long corridors of pine and frost like a trusted mule, slow, steady, unflinching. Warren had driven that plow for over 2 decades, and it had never once stopped without cause. It had pulled out overturned logging rigs, cleared passage for ambulances chasing time, survived 2 engine fires and a blown rear axle. But now it carried something else with it. A presence. It started just as the dusk faded behind the northern ridge. Warren had just finished his second pass around Aroostook Bend and turned to head back toward the southern loop when he felt the pressure again. Like the woods were shifting with him. Not following, not chasing, just being there, matching pace. He slowed the truck slightly, not enough to lose time, just enough to listen. Nothing but wind. He let the lights play farther out, just to the edge of the tree line. And that's when he saw it again, far off this time, just at the edge of visibility. Standing perfectly still, almost like a silhouette pressed against the snowbank. The creature didn't move when the headlights touched it. It didn't lower its eyes or retreat into the woods. It just waited, like a figure carved out of winter itself. Warren didn't reach for the horn this time, didn't move his hand toward the CB. Instead, he eased off the throttle. The plow slowed, rolling over fresh snow like a ship parting water. He kept his eyes forward, never staring too long at the shape in the dark. Something about it, demanded a kind of respect he didn't fully understand, the way you lower your voice in a cathedral, or remove your hat at a grave. As Unit 7 crept forward, the creature stepped away from the road, not quickly, not like it feared anything, but slowly, deliberate, like it had been waiting to see what Warren would do. And now it knew. It disappeared into the tree line without a sound. That night, Warren changed how he drove. He stopped using the high beams on the back roads. They'd always felt like a kind of power before, blazing cones that turned night into false day. But now they felt like something too sharp, something invasive, like a knife pointed at someone offering you their open hands. So he left them off unless absolutely necessary. Drove by the amber halo of his fog lamps. Let the dark have its say, and he stopped hitting the horn. He'd always used it without thinking, to scatter deer, warn a fellow driver, mark his presence when the snow made the radio useless. But now, that sound felt rude, like shouting in a language you didn't speak. So he let the road be quiet again. One night, while idling just outside the Bend's southern incline, Warren stepped down from the cab to clear some packed slush near the blade. The snow had softened with a warm front, then frozen again under a cold snap. The kind that made a crust so thick you could almost walk on top of it. He bent to break up the buildup with a crowbar when something caught his eye. There, carved into the bank just a few feet from the ditch, was an impression. Not a footprint. A hand, large, wide as a dinner plate. 5 distinct fingers, pressed deep into the snow and ice as if someone had braced themselves, either to hold something or to hold someone. Warren didn't move for a long time, just stared at it. The bar still in his hands, steam rising faintly from his breath. There were no other prints nearby, no drag marks, just the one handprint. He didn't take a picture. Didn't call it in, he just looked at it, and something in his chest shifted. Later that same week, in the flash of amber warning lights spinning atop the truck, he saw something else. Not in the forest this time, but on the thing itself. A scar. A line of paler fur slicing across the creature's shoulder, barely visible unless the light hit it just right. It was old, healed over, like a wound from a long time ago. Something that hadn't stopped it but marked it. The realization came slow. Whatever this thing was, it had history. It had been hurt before, and it had survived. Warren sat in the cab that night, hands unmoving on the wheel. He didn't feel brave. He didn't feel afraid. He felt ashamed. For the horn. For the way he'd used it like a weapon, like he had some kind of dominion here. He realized now. It wasn't just him that had territory on these roads. There was someone else, a watcher, a keeper of sorts, not of the roads, of the space just beyond them, the trees, the snow, the line between man's world and whatever still lived beyond man's grasp. He remembered something his grandfather used to say when Warren was just a boy, sitting on the back porch during summer storms. Some things ain't meant to be seen full on. You catch 'em out the corner of your eye, and that's enough. He understood it now. That presence in the forest wasn't meant to be solved. It wasn't a riddle. It was a warning, a boundary, You don't own the woods just because you paved near them. The rest of that shift, Warren barely touched the radio. The cabin lights stayed dimmed. He drove slower. Not because of ice, not because of fatigue, because he didn't want to intrude. And the strangest part? The forest allowed him. Every time he passed the bend, there was a calmness in the trees, a rhythm. The snowbank stayed smooth. The deer kept their distance. The static in the radio faded. He began to understand. Somewhere between those miles, there was a law, a balance, unspoken but firm. And someone, or something, was there to enforce it. He wasn't the enforcer. He was the guest. He thought about the night with Tessa more often now. The way the creature had looked, not at him, but at what she carried. That envelope. He didn't know what was in it. He didn't need to. The thing had seen pain. It had felt the weight of what she held, and it had chosen to step back, not from fear, but out of recognition. Warren knew that now. Knew it in the scar, knew it in the handprint, knew it in the silence after the horn. As dawn began to stretch pale blue fingers across the far hills, Warren guided Unit 7 down the final stretch of plowed road. The snow glistened in soft, untouched waves beside him. Aroostook Bend sat still and deep behind him, the trees resting like old gods. And just before the curve, right at the line where the edge of his headlights met the untouched dark, Warren saw it again. Not the figure, just the shimmer of something larger than man. A shape, barely outlined. One last look, and it stepped backward into the trees. No sound, no warning, just a simple exchange. You've stayed in your lane, and so will I. Warren didn't smile, didn't speak. But inside his chest, something settled. Not finished, not solved, but known. Just enough, and it was enough. For now. Spring in northern Maine didn't arrive the way it did in calendars. It didn't roll in with daffodils or light jackets. It came in patches, slow thaws, a single crow on the power line, melted snowbanks that revealed what winter had buried, branches, beer cans, rusted chains, secrets. Aroostook County softened with caution, like a man waking after surgery, testing each limb before trusting it again. The wind was still cold, but it no longer bit. The trees were still bare, but they no longer clenched. Warren Hale didn't go looking for her. He wasn't even thinking about Christmas Eve that morning. He just wanted coffee and 2 fried eggs at the back counter of Bouchard's General. The kind of quiet breakfast that locals understood not to interrupt. But there she was, by the spinning rack of used paperbacks and fishing licenses. Same coat, same sharp eyes. The woman from the ditch, Tessa Langford. She noticed him at the same time. Didn't flinch, didn't smile either. Just looked at him like someone who'd survived the same fire but stood in a different room when it happened. He gave a small nod, tipped his cap. She hesitated, then stepped toward him. "I owe you," she said simply. Warren didn't correct her. Didn't say it was just part of the job. Because it wasn't. And they both knew it. He motioned to the booth by the window. They sat. No coffee yet. Just the hum of the fridge and the smell of old bacon grease in the air. "I didn't think anyone would come," she said, voice lower now. "Not that night, not at that hour." Warren said nothing. She rubbed her hands together slowly. The nails were short, the skin still cracked from cold. "I didn't tell anyone what I saw," she added. "Did you?" He shook his head once. "Didn't seem like it'd help. I thought maybe I imagined it," she said. "But I didn't." "No," he said, "you didn't." Tessa looked down at the counter, where a sugar shaker sat half full. She twisted it back and forth, the glass catching the weak light coming through the window. "There was this moment," she said slowly, "before you got there. I was still inside the car. The heater was dying. I didn't know what to do. I'd rolled the window down to clear the fog with my sleeve, and I heard something. Not footsteps, not growling, just wait. Like the air was moving differently." Warren's fingers closed around the warm ceramic of his coffee mug, steady. "I thought it was a moose at first, or a bear, but it didn't snort, didn't paw at the car. It circled. You saw it? He asked. I didn't want to, she whispered. Warren waited. I could feel it, she said. It didn't move like it was lost. It moved like it was checking, like it was reading something about me. There was a pause, and then softer still. I almost opened the door. I don't know why. Part of me thought maybe I'd hallucinated, or maybe someone was coming to help. Warren held his breath. Not out of suspense, out of something quieter. I reached for the handle, she continued. And then I saw it. Just the shape, through the snow. It was standing completely still, like it was waiting to see what I'd do. I don't know how to explain it, but I knew I shouldn't open that door. Warren nodded slowly. It wasn't threatening. No, that's what scared me. It was just still, like a warning, not to run, not to move, just to wait. Outside the diner, the wind tapped lightly against the pane. The world had tilted back into green and brown, but a long winter still echoed behind the hills. Tessa looked up. You've seen it more than once, haven't you? He didn't lie. Yes, she let that settle. I don't talk about it much, she said. But I've had bad winters before. I come from a family that falls apart in increments, not all at once. First it's silence, then short answers, then nothing. You don't even notice it's broken until it's too far to fix. He stayed quiet. My father stopped answering calls. My brother stopped visiting. And that night, I didn't think anyone would stop for me either. Her voice broke slightly there. Not into tears, but into truth. I wasn't scared of what was out there, she said. Not really. What scared me was the idea that no one would ever know if I disappeared. Warren stirred his coffee, but didn't drink it. You stopped, she whispered. That's what I remember most. Not the creature, not the snow, just the fact that you stopped. He cleared his throat gently. It's what we do, he said. At least it's what we should do. She nodded, wiping at her eyes quickly. They let the silence hang. Then, as if from nowhere, she added, Do you think it knew I was thinking about giving up? Warren looked out the window for a long moment before answering. I think it saw something, he said finally. Maybe not your thoughts, but your weight. People carry things, and sometimes something out there reads it better than we do. Tessa reached into her coat and pulled out the envelope. The same one he'd seen that night. The same one the creature had stared at, not him. She slid it across the table. Inside was a letter. From her mother, dated December 22nd, 1997. The handwriting was slanted. Careful, the ink had faded. It was a goodbye. The kind people write when they've run out of time, but not out of love. Her mother had mailed it 3 days before the car crash, before the fire, before Tessa was old enough to really understand what grief felt like, other than cold and confusing. She'd kept it with her ever since. But that night, Christmas Eve, was the first time she thought about letting it go, burying it, leaving it in the glove compartment with the frost and dead battery and silence. But something had looked at it, had seen it, and somehow she had clutched it tighter instead. When she finished, Warren leaned back, not in judgment, not even in surprise, but with something closer to understanding. I think whatever's out there, he said. It doesn't come for no reason. It's not lost. It's not curious. It's watching, waiting, not to scare, to balance. She whispered, Balance what? He shrugged. Maybe the things we drop. Her laugh was small, but real. The first he'd heard from her. They talked a while longer, about small things, weather, old boots, mud season. But the story had already been told. In the spaces between the words, in the envelope, in the silence that had once been heavy and now felt like peace. When they left, she said only one thing more. You weren't the first, were you? No, Warren said, and I won't be the last. She looked toward the bend in the road, toward the trees still bare but humming with something old. Good, she said. I hope not. And then she was gone, leaving behind the memory of headlights in snow and a feeling that not everything haunting has to hurt. Warren Hale didn't work every Christmas Eve anymore. That used to be his rhythm. Salted boots, thermos in the cup holder, wipers slicing through a midnight storm while families lit candles and gathered around fireplaces. But time has a way of thinning even the strongest routines. He'd taken retirement slow, like stepping off ice too carefully to trust the ground beneath. For the first few years, he still helped with early routes when the young guys needed cover, still filled his coat pockets with butterscotch candies and kept the radio low on AM, even though no one else listened to that anymore. But on this particular December, the snow came back hard enough that the plows ran short on hands, hard enough that the phone rang late. And Warren, who hadn't taken the call for 3 winters straight, said yes before dispatch could finish the sentence. He didn't tell anyone why. Didn't mention that he'd been waking up at 3:17 for weeks now without an alarm. That every time the wind scraped the window just right, he felt something stir inside him, like a road calling back. He arrived before dark, same as always. Parked by the depot while the others prepped newer trucks with newer blades and less rust. Unit 7 had been decommissioned the year prior. Too many repairs, too many ghosts in the gears. But they let him use it for the night, out of respect. Or maybe because no one else wanted to drive the thing through Aroostook Bend during a whiteout. The storm had been building all afternoon, the sky low and heavy, pale as unwashed bone. By the time Warren was halfway through his shift, the roads had vanished into memory. Every bend looked the same, every mile a mirror of the one before. The kind of storm that swallowed your sense of time and made the whole world feel like a waiting room between two worlds. He felt it before he saw it, the familiar tightening in his chest. That strange peace threaded with tension, not fear, just presence. Snow lashed the windshield like 1,000 whispered warnings. Visibility dropped to barely a car length, but he knew where he was. The truck's lights caught the wooden mile marker near the bend, tilted slightly now, aged by weather and silence. Aroostook Bend, and then he saw the clock. 3:17. Same numbers, same glow. Like a ritual. He didn't smile, didn't speak. Just eased the truck forward with quiet fingers on the wheel. The world outside was motionless chaos, everything screaming, and yet underneath it all, a stillness like breath held. Warren felt the engine lurch slightly as the front tires met a ridge of deeper snow. Then a flicker on the side of the road. Not movement, not light, just absence. A gap in the white, where something larger than the wind stood. He didn't reach for the horn. He didn't need to. The shape didn't move, just stood, tall and solid, where the trees thinned out into road edge. Snow slid across its shoulders, caught in the thick outline of fur that shimmered under the spinning amber lights. The face was unreadable, tucked in shadow, but the posture was unmistakable. It was waiting, not for him, for something else. And then the engine coughed, just once, then again. The lights flickered, the dashboard dimmed. Unit 7 groaned, shuddered, then choked itself into silence. The cab went dark. The heater died. Warren sat in sudden quiet, the kind of quiet that had weight. He tried the key. Nothing. The storm screamed louder without the engine to muffle it. Outside, the snow danced wild, choking the world in white. His breath fogged the glass, thick and fast. He wrapped his gloved hands around the steering wheel, felt the cold bleeding in through the rubber. He tried the radio. Dead. Battery gone? Alternator? Didn't matter. This wasn't coincidence. The storm wanted him here, or something inside it did. He was too far from town to walk. Wind like this would slice a man open in 30 minutes or less. And even if he stayed inside, he knew what cold could do when machines failed. That's when he noticed the shape again. It had moved, closer now. Not menacing, not urgent, just closer. It stepped into the light and stood between him and the wind, blocking it, like a wall, a breathing wall. Snow curled around its frame but didn't touch the space directly behind it. The wind howled on either side, but not through the middle. Warren stared, barely breathing. The creature's head turned, not sharply, gently, toward him, then toward the road ahead. Warren followed its gaze, and there, hidden by the slope of the bank, lay a fallen tree, thick trunk, invisible until now, buried beneath the drifting snow just a few feet beyond where his truck would have driven had the engine not failed. He would have hit it hard. With no lights, no momentum, maybe no time to react, it could have rolled the truck, pinned him in snow, left him in a ditch no one would find until morning. And this thing, this silent presence, had known, had stopped him, had braced him, had waited to be seen. Warren didn't wave, didn't speak, just looked. The creature turned slowly and began to walk toward the woods again, disappearing inch by inch as snow reclaimed the space behind it. Not in a rush, not in fear, just done. Warren turned the key again. The engine coughed once, then started. Lights returned. Radio blinked to life, catching the tail end of a weather bulletin. Outside, the fallen tree remained, but the path forward was visible now, and the clock, 3:18. He cleared the obstruction carefully, marking it for the others. Finished his route. Parked Unit 7 just after dawn, hands still shaking a little, not from cold, but from whatever had brushed past him inside the storm. He didn't file a report, didn't say anything to the guys at the depot, who were too busy with their own shifts to notice the silence in his eyes. He just went home, made coffee, sat in his chair, and whispered a thank you into the quiet. Not sure who exactly it was for, but meaning it all the same. That night, as frost traced ghost-thin lines on his window, Warren watched the trees bend in the wind and knew one thing for certain. There were guardians in the dark, not to punish, not to haunt, but to keep balance, to protect the edge between what we know and what we were never meant to. And he had been spared not because he mattered more, but because for once he had listened, and something had listened back. Warren Hale no longer drove plows, not officially. The county took his name off the winter roster 4 years back. Unit 7 had long been retired, replaced by something sleeker with more sensors and less soul. These days, his boots stayed dry. His flannel hung by the door mostly out of habit. And yet, every time the cold came early, every time the first snow curled across the empty fields, Warren felt it return. That old thrum in his bones, like memory warming up an engine. He didn't talk about Aroostook Bend anymore. Not to neighbors, not to old co-workers, not even to the new kid at the general store who asked once why he always paused outside before walking in. There are stories you tell, and stories that settle into the silence between words. He still woke at 3:17, without fail, sometimes in a cold sweat, heart thudding for no reason. Other times just wide awake, as if summoned, as if a road was still calling him from beneath the frost. And so when summer rolled in that year, warmer than usual, with trout thick in the streams and tourists starting to clog the local diners again, Warren did what he'd done for decades. He went fishing. Same spot near the bend. Same narrow pull-off that most folks missed if they weren't looking. The creek had carved a quiet channel between the trees, and the shade there was thick even at midday. He didn't bring bait anymore. Didn't need to catch anything. The rod was more of an excuse to sit still without being questioned, and that's when he saw it. A set of tracks. Not fresh, not obvious, but unmistakable to someone who'd seen them before. Not boots, not bare. Too broad, too careful. He crouched near the edge of the bank, where the moss had peeled back just enough to show the outline. It had rained last week, hard, and whatever left those prints had come through after. 2 steps only. No drag, no mess. Like it had been watching the same creek from the other side. He didn't move, didn't call out, just let the air settle again, as if the woods needed permission to breathe. The scent of pine and loam filled his lungs, and something old stirred beneath his ribs. Not fear, not awe, just understanding. It was still here. Whatever it was. Whatever name people refused to give it, it hadn't gone. Later that week, he stopped by the auto garage just outside Fort Fairfield. Not for parts, not for oil, just to catch up. That's where he ran into Evan Rourke. Evan was all shoulders and nervous energy, with a back pocket full of receipts and a memory like a cracked windshield. Some things clear, others scattered and half-formed. But when Warren walked in, Evan froze, like he'd just been reminded of something his body remembered before his mouth did. "You drove County Unit 7, right?" Evan asked. Warren nodded. "Back when it still had bolts." Evan scratched the back of his neck. "You ever get strange stuff out by the bend?" Warren didn't answer at first, just waited. Evan's voice dropped. "Few weeks ago, I was headed back from Caribou. Roads were fine. Little mist, nothing serious. But coming past the north end of Aroostook, something stepped out onto the shoulder. Animal. That's the thing. I don't know. It didn't move like an animal. Didn't spook when my high beams hit it. Just stood there, right at the edge of the light." Warren's fingers tapped the counter slowly. "Did it follow you?" "No, but it didn't leave either. I slowed way down. Real slow. Just enough to pass without stopping. When I looked in the mirror, it was gone. Like it had never been there." Warren nodded once. "What time?" Evan hesitated. 3:17. The way he said it, like he almost didn't want to say it, confirmed what Warren already knew. That time had passed to someone new. The story was no longer his alone. He didn't give Evan advice. Didn't warn him. Just said, "You did the right thing. You kept driving." Evan squinted. "That means something?" Warren smiled softly. "Maybe not yet, but one day it might." That night, Warren pulled an old notebook from the back of his closet, the one he hadn't opened since the last snowfall he worked. Inside were route maps, notes scribbled in the margins, and a few Polaroids he'd never shown anyone. Nothing conclusive, nothing clean, just blurred shapes in fog, and that old burn-edged photo Marcy had once shared with him. He stared at the last page. It was blank. He picked up a pen, wrote just one line. "Tell someone when they're ready." 2 weeks later, he sat on the porch with a cup of lukewarm coffee and watched a raven land on the fence post. The sky was clear, the woods still, but something about the air felt familiar. He wasn't sure what finally made him say it aloud. Maybe the quiet, maybe the years, maybe the feeling that stories die when they're buried too long. He told it to a neighbor's grandson, a teenager who mowed his lawn in summer for $20 and had once asked what the scar on Warren's hand was from. Warren told him everything, not all at once, not like a campfire tale, more like planting seeds, little by little, letting them take root. Not to frighten, not to impress, just to pass it forward. Because stories like this aren't about endings. They're about inheritance. He told him about the way the creature stood just outside the edge of light, about the silence in the radio, about how it had never tried to harm him, but never let him forget it was there, about how sometimes the most powerful things never need to speak to be understood. When the boy asked what it wanted, Warren shook his head. "I don't think it wants anything," he said. "I think it reminds. Reminds us of what? That we're not alone out there, that there are rules older than ours, that stopping matters." The boy was quiet for a long time, then nodded. It was enough. That summer, Warren walked the bend again. The air smelled of warm bark and sap. And at the edge of the road, just where the gravel faded to moss, he paused, not because he saw anything, but because something in his bones told him to. He turned his head slowly, and for a brief second, caught the glint of something watching from the trees. Amber. Still, not a threat. Just waiting. He didn't wave, didn't move, just stood, and felt the years settle. Back home, he wrote one more line, right under the first. Because kindness leaves a mark even in the snow. And beneath that, almost an afterthought, one last sentence. Some things don't ask to be believed. They just wait to be remembered. That night, for the first time in years, Warren slept through 3:17. But the story didn't. Sometimes, the most important stories aren't the ones we shout from mountaintops. They're the quiet ones, the ones that happen in stillness, far from the noise of the world, where only the wind and trees bear witness. They're the stories that unfold not to be told, but to be lived. The ones that remind us there are truths older than words and deeper than logic. That not everything sacred needs to be explained. In a world rushing toward brightness and volume, there is still meaning in the pause, still value in slowing down, in watching the edges of the road, in listening for the unspoken. There's something beautiful about the moments that come without warning and ask nothing from us except to notice. Because sometimes what we find in the dark isn't danger. It's balance. It's grace. It's a reminder that not everything forgotten is gone, and not everything unseen is imaginary. And perhaps the most human thing we can do is to stop, to reach out, to leave a trail of kindness in our wake, even when no one is watching, especially then. Because the smallest acts, the ones that feel invisible, might be the very things that echo loudest in someone else's life. And that echo, passed quietly from one person to another, is what makes the world a little softer, a little more forgiving. So if there's a message to carry forward, let it be this. Go gently. Pay attention to the quiet. Honor what you don't fully understand. And if you see someone stranded, in any way, on the road, in the cold, or just in their own life, don't look away. You never know who or what is watching from the trees. And more importantly, you never know how far a simple act of compassion can reach. Thank you for walking this path with us, for feeling each step, and for letting your heart stay open to the unknown. If this story touched you in some way, we'd be honored to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Your reflections, your memories, your questions, they all help keep these stories alive. And if you'd like to join us for more tales that sit just beyond the edge of the ordinary, please consider liking, subscribing, and turning on notifications. Every voice, every presence, helps build the kind of quiet, thoughtful community this world could use a little more of. Until next time, stay kind, stay curious, and never stop listening to what moves at the edge of the light.